So, as Carla mentioned, I do work for PATN. It's Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network, and it actually is called PATN, not the PAN. But anyhow, and basically we are the Training and Technical Assistance arm of the Department of Education Bureau of Special Education. We are committed to service, making sure that kids are educated in the least restrictive environment, and folks that work in transition career tech ed, I think it's a natural fit for us because we are trying to prepare kids to go on for further training, employment, and independent living in their communities. Today what I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to start with the effective process for secondary transition in middle schools and high schools, and then kind of how that intersects with what you all are doing in career tech ed centers, because we're working collaboratively with that same student. I think that we have done a really good job in the past, I'd say 20 years, of working collaboratively with career tech ed specialists. I think even more so than some of the other folks in the education system and our agency system, and working collaboratively. So we're going to talk about that. And then following kind of that overview, I want to talk about what we have currently going on in our state that the Department of Education, Bureau of Special Education system is doing, along with our agency partners. And then finally wrap up with some resources in our state. So, what constitutes an effective secondary transition program? I think the first thing I wanted to mention is involving and inviting the student to participate not only in the IEP meeting, but in the educational process. One of the important things I think to always remember is why are we doing what we're doing, and how engaged is that young person in this process. I don't necessarily think this is done effectively at all times. I will stop a junior or senior in high school and say, hey, what's in your IEP, or what goals are you working on this year? And they look at me like, what the hell are you talking about, you strange man? And that's not really a good thing, because kids really should have an idea of what they're working on. They should also have an idea of what their disability is, and I think people get really hung up on that. So it's not really necessarily what their disability is, but it is what do you struggle with because of that disability, and then what accommodations and supports you need to be successful. And it's not the 4 pages of specially designed instruction in the IEP.
4 pages?
It's sometimes, unfortunately. And I do get really bitchy about that when I see those. But I think it's really not even the 1 page of specially designed instruction that is in an IEP. It is, what are those 3 or 4 things that I can use and I know about that are going to help me be successful? And I mention that because, again, I work with the Pennsylvania Youth Leadership Network, and I'll talk more about that, but it's youth, young adults without disabilities that work with kids while they're still in high school. And we talk to a lot of high school age kids. And last year, I was with a group of young guys that were sitting at this table at one of the meetings we had, talking, what's your disability? Just so happened they all had reading disabilities. I said, oh, what do you do if you can't read something? And they said, oh, we asked my mom. I asked my dad. And it's like, okay, dude, you are how old? And you're asking your mother for help. And they all had smartphones sitting in front of them that they were texting, or I don't know what else they were doing. But I guess my point in saying that is the technology, and they had it right in their hand, and they didn't know about it, and they weren't using it. So I think we really need to try to engage the young person as much as possible in this process. Now, from a compliance standpoint, and I'm going to kind of flip back and forth, the young person, the student, has to be invited to the IEP meeting starting at age 14. That's the IEP year that the kid turns 14, up through graduation. We used to require that a separate invitation for both the student and the parent was generated and given out. This past year that changed. So it's 1 letter that's sent out. You are inviting both the young person and their family to attend on that invitation letter. I think the important thing, though, in my mind, is this is just the first step. The bigger step is the kid is involved and actively engaged. We still have, and I still read this in IPs and in talking to teachers, kids that are juniors in high school, and the parents don't want the kid to know that they have, say, autism. And I think there's many issues with that. That's one of the issues. There was a young woman that I talked to a few years back, and she said that her parent would never talk to her about the fact that she had attention deficit disorder and a learning disability, and she always knew there was something wrong with her. And it wasn't until she was in 10th grade that she realized what that was, and oh, that made all the difference. And I thought, okay, we're not hiding anything. So I think it's important to get that out as early as possible. By the time kids get to us and those of us who work in middle school and high school, it does get harder. So really it's a big push, I think, in the elementary grades to do that. The other piece that is a requirement, and I want to talk about as far as this process, is agency involvement in the IEP team meeting. And agencies, I guess we're talking about a couple different things. You have everybody connected to the school system. So, and I think we've done a pretty good job in special education and our training, so folks know that Career Tech Ed is not an outside agency. I think we've done it, finally, because 10 years ago doing these trainings, that was not the case, so I do think that they know we're all one. But we're really talking about outside agencies. So like the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, the Offices of Intellectual Disabilities, mental health, provider, agencies in the community, that's who we're talking about here. And we need to have those folks invited and engaged in this process because they're the ones that are going to help in this transition process. When you look at the folks in Career Tech Ed, this is really, and basically what this is a screenshot of, is the signature page of the IEP. It is also important that someone from the Career Tech Ed Center is invited to that IEP meeting if Career Tech Ed is being considered for a young person, a student, or they are already engaged in that process. And if they're unable to attend, their name still needs to be included and information needs to be provided. But I think we really stress that folks need to make every effort to make sure that that person is there and engaged in that process. And that's just showing kind of where that would go. And then when you have this here, this is if a revision is done to the IEP meeting, again, that the Career Tech Ed is part of that process. So it really should not be a surprise to any changes that are happening with kids that are in special education involving Career Tech Ed. These are a couple of examples of what agency statements could look like in an IEP. The first example is of a young person, and they're a little older, and they are actually involved with both the Office of Intellectual Disabilities and the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. They met with their supports coordinators, and he has an open case, and they're involved in the IEP meeting. The second example is of a young person who is younger, is 15, has a learning disability, and currently there are no specific agency that would provide services to them. However, I guess the disclaimer here now with the changes with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA, probably have heard that being buzzed about. It's the VR, the OVR new regulations. They are getting involved with students earlier. So I think in the case of Sophia, probably in revising this, parents would be provided with information along with Sophia, and there may be some of those early work opportunity programs that might be involved with Sophia and OVR. Okay, this slide, and this is a little different than some of the past presentations I did, but and the reason I'm saying that is this is the transition process. This is what should be happening in the school systems in special education. So it's first starting with age-appropriate transition assessments, and you're assessing the needs, the strengths, the preferences, and the interests of that young person. And those are done in a couple different ways, right? We do the interest assessments, things that are usually based on the Holland Code to kind of give us an idea what that young person wants to do. But then we also look at the academic assessments and see what that young person can do. So for example, if the young person said, yes, I'm really interested in going into nursing, then looking kind of where they are academically, and is that going to be an easy fit, or is there a lot of intervention that's going to be done, and then having that discussion with that young person and their family. That leads then to writing measurable post-secondary goals. So these are those transition goals that we're looking at regarding education and training, employment, and independent living. These are goals that happen after the student leaves the school setting, so that's why they're post-secondary goals. And we can't write these until we have the assessment that's showing what exactly that young person is going to be doing. The other thing that we talk about in training, when we do trainings with the school districts, is that all three of these areas need to be addressed, right? So we have to talk with that family about, okay, what type of employment do you see your son or daughter involved with, and for that young person, what do you want to do someday? What kind of job do you want to have? Then looking at, okay, then what type of education and training is needed to support that? And then lastly, what type of support or where do they want to live as far as the community goes? In this independent living place would also be issues of, for example, around housing, transportation, selective service, voter registration, and so forth. Then we also look at the transition section of the IEP, or the transition grid, and that is actually kind of takes into these two sections. So one, you have the course of study, the classes the kid is taking, and then you have the activities that they're involved with. We mentioned then coordinating this with outside agencies, and then writing the measurable annual goals that are really should go back and connect to what the student wants to do once they leave school. So for students enrolled in career and tech ed centers, we look at the IEP. These are areas particularly that information should be included in the IEP. So information in the present ed levels regarding their attendance in career and tech ed, any tests they've taken or the tasks that they were doing and what their grades were, what their work was like. And fortunately, what I oftentimes will see is John goes to Western Center Vo-Tech School in Culinary Arts, period. Okay, well that's nice, but what? Like, how's he doing? What competencies has he mastered? What's his attendance like? Is that what he even wants to do? Because the other thing, and I know I'm not saying anything you guys don't already know, but you know, maybe that's not the field the kid even wants to get into, then what else are they looking at, and how can we help that young person to be successful with employment? So this piece is really important. In the transition section, and so this is the grid, you know, looking at post-secondary, the post-secondary goal, the employment goals, making sure the career tech ed is listed there as both a course of study as well as some of the activities that could be done. And then looking at if there are any specially designed instruction that especially the career tech ed needs to be aware of. So things such as, you know, this kid really has a hard time with reading comprehension. However, if you use this strategy with this kid, he does really good. Well, that's important for you all to know. Back years and years and years ago, actually Ruth and I, and we're getting old, I think it goes back like 28 years now when we first started working together. I worked at a private school, and I had students that were at Steele Center at the time. And one of the things that we would do at the school is I would write up kind of a cheat sheet for the IEP of these are the specific things that you need to look for. And then we would go in and talk, and we would talk to the teachers. That's really effective practice. I would hope that that's still going on in some places, because I think that is really useful to have that direct communication. The other thing with career tech ed teachers, you know, providing that specific information about, again, I mentioned in the specific courses of study, any other types of opportunities they have around work. You are going to be hearing, especially with the OVR WIOA, a lot of emphasis around employment, pre-employment types of activities. So I think the things that you all are doing in career tech ed centers are going to become even more in focus in the next year or two because of that. Because there's going to really be a spotlight on what are we doing in the education system to better prepare kids, especially kids with disabilities, to be successful when they graduate and going on for college careers as well as employment. So this next set of slides, I want you to introduce this student, Aaron. And Aaron is a student in the 11th grade. He's fully included. He's enrolled in the Career and Tech Ed Education program in auto body repair. He's not sure what he wants to do right after school, either go on for further training or he wants to go right into work. And he has a learning disability and he has reading and writing needs. And what I want to do in these next couple slides is just show you kind of what his transition section could look like. So this is that transition grid. So it's section 3 of an IEP. Call it a grid because it's a grid, and that was actually Diane Sobolewski years ago. We worked on this, and so anyhow, it's the grid. And sometimes people say, what the hell's the grid? Well, this is the grid. So post-secondary education and training goal. So he has a goal of enrolling in post-secondary training in the area of auto body repair or related field. We do put yes up here because there are measurable annual goals, and it's right here. It's for him to continue improving writing and editing skills and using self-monitoring. So that is the connection there. That is his measurable annual goal that's supporting his post-secondary goal. Courses of study are here, and these are basically the classes the young person is enrolled in. And then, as I mentioned, we have his measurable annual goal, and then these are activities, right, that he will continue to work on that are going to help him with his goal of possibly going on for further training. So continue to expand the use of materials in digital format because, remember back, he has this learning disability in reading and writing, and then to look at developing a list of questions to use when visiting post-secondary programs. So he knows what to ask, like what kind of supports do you have at that particular school. The thing with the grid too, these things actually have to happen, and somebody should be recording what the results are of them. These shouldn't just be nice suggestions, they should actually occur within the course of that IEP year, and somebody should be documenting their success. This is, so let me just slip back. So his goal was to continue to improve writing and editing skills using self-monitoring, basically proofreading. So if we look at his goal for writing, we're going to teach him a strategy called SCOPE, and you're giving him a spelling guide, and basically what we want him to do is become proficient in proofreading. Because, remember, his job that he wants to have someday is an auto body. Auto body people usually have to write up an estimate on work. You don't want Aaron to be the dude that, I don't know if I want him to work in my car because he can't even write up an estimate. So it was a way of kind of having him self-monitor to be able to be independent. So this is the next section of the grid, looking at employment. Okay, so he has a goal of competitive employment in the area of auto body repair or a related field. He also has difficulty with reading, so it's to continue to improve his reading comprehension skills for summarizing and identifying details. And then he has two other types of activities that he's going to be doing. One is to improve the speed and discrimination of a project completion in auto body shop because Aaron is a perfectionist and he is not able to perform at a rate that he's going to be employed. So this is something, in talking with Career Tech Ed, yeah, we really need to get Aaron to work on this. So that is that particular area. And then looking at obtaining information regarding employment opportunities in local shops, what's available in this area. And then this is an example of what his reading goal could be. Given written questions involving summarizing in details, that he'll be able to respond with 80% accuracy in 4 out of 5 consecutive trials. I wanted to mention too that what this particular set of slides is showing too is that there is a collaboration, or should be a collaboration, between that school district and the Career Tech Ed Center. There really should be discussion, and it should be an integrated program for this student. I also realize what I'm saying is an effective practice example of what should be occurring, because sometimes within a very large school system, within a high school, this may not be happening. But this is what should be happening. Then his last particular area in the transition grid is independent living. And for Aaron, it was determined that this is an area that's not needed because if we give a little more backstory on Aaron, he drives, he has a part-time job, he's able to maintain everything, his own hygiene and cleanliness and all that stuff. So that would be in present ed levels explaining it, and then therefore he doesn't have an independent living goal. However, in the IEP, you should know why Aaron doesn't have an independent living goal. And it shouldn't be a statement just like, hey, Aaron's like everybody else. And I see that, unfortunately, written in IEPs. So if Aaron is like everybody else, then tell me why he's like everybody else and why he does not need an independent living goal. All right. And please jump in if you have any questions. I'm just kind of motoring through because they cut my hour down to 45 minutes. So anyhow, no. Well, you did, but that's okay. I'm not going to make a big deal. Summary of performance is the other thing I just wanted to mention briefly. In the summary of performance, is a requirement that has to occur for kids that are in special education and have an IEP when the student is exiting or leaving school, graduating from school, from high school. Basically, what the summary of academic achievement and functional performance is, it is a document given to the student that talks to that individual about what their strengths were, what their needs were, what accommodations they used to be successful, and then what agencies and organizations they should connect with as they're graduating. That's what it is. There is really good resources, and I'm going to just quickly run over and pull this up on the patent website. So if you have not seen these, I suggest kind of going here and looking at these. Just give me one quick second, pull this up. So what you'll see here, if you go to the patent site, under, and if you just go to that hyperlink that's there, we have two documents that were developed. One is they're both for families. One is an informational guide, and then one is actually a booklet that families can work through in helping them to see what the development of a summary of performance should look like. So if you haven't seen that or are not aware of that, I would highly recommend going there and looking at that document. The thing with the summary of academic achievement and functional performance is that it should be a document that is not news to the kid or the family. That information should have been included in the IEP, I would say starting like in 9th grade at least. About, hey, this is the kid, this is what they're able to do, this is what they struggle with, these are the accommodations and supports they use, these are agencies to connect with. So realistically, that last IEP that that kid has in their last year in school, so their senior year in school, that really should look a lot like the summary performance. So what I oftentimes will tell families is, hey, look at what's in those resources I just showed you. You go to that IEP meeting, talk to them about what should be included, what should be in there. Career and Tech Ed folks, your part of this is, especially looking at that young person, if they're in a particular field of study, what supports might they need, what successes have they had, but where are they headed? So if they're in auto body, like Aaron, are they going to be able to get a job with this? Or are they going to need more training? Or what type of supports? Like, yes, they did well, but we had to make sure that these reminders were given to that young person to be successful. All right, so that's the time. All right, so moving on and talking a little bit about our current projects, activities, and resources in Pennsylvania. And this slide is showing some of the things that we have going on in Pennsylvania this current year, so 2015-16. Some of these I'm going to go over in detail. Others we're just going to brush upon right now. So we are still doing trainings for LEAs in Indicator 13. Everybody know Indicator 13? Show of hands real quick. Yes? Yeah, nods. Okay. We are still doing Indicator 13 trainings. We have about 125 LEAs that we are engaged with this current year. One of the emphasis has been on charter schools and cyber charter schools to work with them on transition planning and Indicator 13. The projection is that will continue next year. We are looking at right now doing some type of online format for that particular training. I am going to talk in a few minutes about the Renew process. We also continue with our webinar series this year of informational topics that are being presented through our Community of Practice on Secondary Transition, and I'll give you more information about that in a few minutes. I want to talk a little bit about the document we developed last year for Career Ed and Special Ed. We're going to talk a little bit about three of the grants that we have currently going on in our state. I want to talk a little bit about the Pennsylvania Youth Leadership Network in a little more depth, and the Planning for the Future checklist. So let's kind of jump into this next part. Just show of hands real quick. Who has heard about Renew? Rehabilitation for Empowerment, Natural Supports, Education at Work. Mary. Okay. What Renew is It was developed in 1996, not in our state. This is from the University of Connecticut. And it is a person-centered planning process, but it is tied directly to students that have mental behavioral health needs or issues. And the goals of Renew in this person-centered planning process is to help kids with behavioral mental health needs in completing high school, gaining employment, engaging in post-secondary education, and involving them in the community. And it's based really on research, like the research done by Wagner and Davis, that talks about the fact that for kids to be successful that have mental health issues, they need to work on relationships. They need to see the relevance in what we're doing programmatically with them. And we need to really be addressing that whole individual student and their family. So Renew is person-centered planning. People know person-centered planning. Okay, so person-centered planning is really a fairly intensive process where you're looking at the individual, but also those people that know that individual well. And what you're doing is helping them look at or plan for their future, what they want to do. So get a job, live in X community, go on to school, but then what supports are they going to need to get there? Probably the easiest way to explain it. Renew in our state has been around for the last 4 years, and these are some quotes from students involved in the Renew process. And I think they're pretty powerful if you kind of just look through these, especially the third one. And the thing with Renew, what it does is I think it allows the team that's working with that young person, and by the way, this is done in school districts for kids that have the most significant need and are in danger of dropping out, or maybe have dropped out and are coming back into school. But what it really does is it brings a team together to not necessarily look at the fact, I'm going to use a Pittsburgh term here, that they're a jagoff in school. But what we really want to do is look at, okay, why are you struggling? What are the needs you have as a student? And what supports and what help can we give you? And it's to take the time to go through this process. Part of the process, there are a series of maps. There's 10 maps that they look at, and each of the maps address a different area to help in supporting that young person. One of the maps, and it's one of the ones I really do like, it's looking at what supports you have. You know, it's having that young person focus on who is helping that young person. And you have in the center, these are people that I really need in my life, and then you start going out in that circles, and then you have an area outside of that of these people I don't want in my life. But it's really important because with some kids, they might not have anybody in that inner circle, and that's a real problem if they don't have people that can really help and support them. The other thing it's really telling is who is in their I don't want to be bothered area, because that also is really important. And it's sometimes difficult for the education folks working in this. I worked with a team last year, and this teacher said, well, he didn't put me in his inner circle, but I talked to him. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? You were not in his inner circle. He did not see you in that role. And that's the important thing. And for those kids to build trust and know what resources they have. There are some really wonderfully done videos on the Patton website about the Renew process. I would recommend really, if you have a chance, just pick one of these to review. They really are, they're touching. And I think for, again, folks in career and tech ed, if you have any kids involved in this process, or you have kids you feel could benefit from it, I think do contact the sending school and see if they're involved in this process. Because it really is one of the most effective, I think, projects we have for kids that have mental health needs. Mary, do you agree?
Yes.
Yeah.
Michael, the sending districts are not familiar with this. How do we go about?
Okay, let me.
Maybe you're going to talk about that. So
Well, no, I'll flip here real quick. These are the contacts, and this is in your PowerPoint. Mike Miner works out of our office along with Silke Caparelli. Mike is probably, he and I work pretty closely on a couple of initiatives. I would have them contact him, and then he can get in contact with them. And either talk about, yes, your school is, or this is how they could get involved. Yes?
I just need a little clarification on Renew. Is it a program kind of like SPART within the school that that teachers and school people are involved in, or is it like OVR, an outside agency?
Both. So basically, there's a team that comes together for that young person. And it's usually a team that the young person helps to direct and talk about, these are the people that should be involved in my life. So it is a school team, but it's also the outside people that are connected with that young person. So if they are connected to the mental health system, they have a behavioral therapist that's involved with them, it's those folks that are connected to that young person. The one Renew meeting that I went to, I think there were 22 different people represented at this meeting because this young person had lots and lots and lots and lots of issues. So it's not just an internal school component. Mary?
Michael, do they have, in order to do Renew in a school, do they have to be involved at the high school level with the positive behavior support team?
You do not have to be, but they are closely aligned.
Yes.
But you can do Renew without being a positive behavior school. Yes, you can. It probably makes sense that they are involved in positive behavior support in that program, but you don't have to be. Yeah, they weren't really connected like that.
Last year, I guess, it was connected because there was money attached, but you had to.
Right. And I think it probably would make sense for somebody to do this to also be involved in positive behavior support, just well, the overlap between the two. Real quickly, we currently have over 70 sites, 70 LEA sites involved in this process. What we have done, I showed you the 3 trainers that are involved in this project through the patent system, but then we have 26 train the trainers, which Mary is one, involved in this process to go out and help schools with this Renew process. I think the one thing I do have to say about Renew, it is extremely intensive and it's a student-by-student basis. So this isn't something you're doing with 30 kids. This is something you're probably doing with 2 or 3 kids in a particular school district. The next thing I wanted to mention a little bit, and I talked a little bit about this before, the Pennsylvania Community of Practice on Secondary Transition. And the Community of Practice on Transition is connected to our Memorandum of Understanding that was signed through our state agency departments. So we have representation from the Department of Education and its Special Education, Bureau of Special Education, involved with that. We have OVR, Department of Labor and Industry. We have Department of Human Services, and that would include Office of Intellectual Disabilities, like the ODT folks. It also includes the mental health, the OMSAS folks. It also includes juvenile corrections, children, family, and youth services, and then also the Department of Health is involved in our community of practice at the state level. And then we have our parent groups, youth advocacy groups involved in this, as well as provider agencies. So it's a comprehensive way of looking at supporting kids in transition. And basically, all those people I just mentioned are working together to ensure the kids that we're working with are successful once they leave school. One of the things I wanted to mention in this process is for the last 10 years, we have used a year-round strategy in getting information out and supports out regarding supporting kids that are in transition. We have run a series of webinars, and the last 3 years are on the patent website. And I don't know, have folks ever gone and looked at these? Some nods. All right, I'm just going to take you real quick to show you kind of where these are, because they're really good resources. They're recorded, they're closed captioned, and if you haven't gone, whoa, don't do that. I would really recommend going and looking at these. So just give me 1 second. Let me come out of here and show you these real quick. Yeah. Okay, so if you go to the patent website, and you can either go and look at videos, or you can go to that link that's on your PowerPoint. These are 62 videos that are related to secondary transition. And there are a number of topics that are there, and including, as you look down here, some of the Renew videos are highlighted. As I mentioned, they are closed captioned, and I guess the other thing, they're free. And I think the other positive about this is, and with the webinar series, is you can watch these, you know, I don't know if you wake up like I do, 3 in the morning. You can go down and watch these and kind of get the information. You don't necessarily have to be on them when they're broadcast. The other thing we have coming up in July is our annual conference. It is July 20th through the 22nd at the Penn Stater. We have about 100 breakout sessions, keynotes, featured sessions. If you have never gone, I recommend doing that. We also offer scholarships to youth and families to attend. And our brochure for this will be coming out mid-May. The other thing I wanted to mention is the Planning for the Future checklist. This is a document that was developed a couple of years back in a collaboration with the United Way of Allegheny County and the Department of Education, along with families, youth. And the purpose of this checklist, and you have a copy in your folder, it's the blue document. The checklist itself is designed to help families, young folks, and the IEP team look at and make considerations for what supports are needed regarding further training, employment, and independent living based on different age band levels. We edited this, so this is a new revised edition. This was sent out to every LEA across the state about 2 weeks ago. And it's also on our patent website and secondarytransition.org website. We are also in the process of making hyperlinks to the electronic version. So when you see it online, you'll be able to scroll over. So for example, where it says OBR, it'll take you to OBR information. It's highlighted on the patent website, and I wanted to just, for a minute, and hopefully this works, show you one of the videos that we've done that's related to this, because the video itself is done with a young person that is involved in career and tech ed. So let me find Ian, and hopefully this will work. It is not. I'm not quite sure why it's not, but when you get a chance, this week, tonight, let me show you where this is located. If you go to, again, the patent site, and you're looking under secondary transition, and you go to the Planning for the Future checklist, there are 3 videos. But the one that you want to look at is the video with this guy, Ian. That is actually his name. It's not his last name. That's somebody that he liked, I guess. But Ian is a carpentry student, and what the video shows is an interagency team meeting. And at the interagency team meeting is a career tech ed representative, a transition coordinator, a school nurse, his mom, an OBR counselor. And it shows how this integrated meeting should occur and how to integrate the Planning for the Future checklist. It also, I think, shows kind of how the student can be more actively engaged in this process. So if you haven't seen it yet, I really would, and I'm sorry that is not working for some reason, but I would really recommend going there and looking at it, and particularly that video. The other 3 videos on there are kids at different ages with different disability types. But when we were putting these together, I really felt pretty strongly we needed to have an example of a career tech ed kid. And that particular student has a learning disability and asthma because that seemed to make the most sense. So, but please view that if you haven't, and share it. I mean, I think it's good for families, youth, as well as schools to see how this should be done and how it can be integrated. So we also, as I mentioned in that overview slide, have been focusing on career tech ed, and this resource we worked on last year. It was developed with folks from special ed, career tech ed. It's this booklet. If you haven't seen this yet, I would highly recommend looking at it. Basically what we did was we took 2 documents that used to exist in the patent system. When we went back and looked at them, Patty and I, along with a number of other folks who were involved, Carla, in this process, I think this is really useful. And I think it would be something I'd want to share with middle school to start, because that was really the intent. And I think this is a really good guide. So if you haven't seen this yet, you are not using it, really would highly recommend you doing that. The other thing I wanted to mention, last year in January, we did a webinar. It was actually a number of people presenting here at this conference today, but it's one of those videos that is recorded and captioned. And the topic was looking at how to collaborate between special ed and career tech ed. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, again, I would highly recommend you watching that, because there was a lot of really good information provided, and the resource materials are also available on the patent site. Okay, we have 3 statewide grants that we're currently doing. First grant I wanted to mention is called the Transition Discoveries Grant. It is a grant that was awarded through the Developmental Disabilities Council. It was awarded to Temple University, George Washington University, in collaboration with the Pennsylvania Youth Leadership Network. The purpose of the grant was to engage stakeholders and discussing what is working in supporting kids in transition and what is not working. And the ultimate goal of this is to then develop a tool that can be used to look at how well that transition process is happening in schools and the communities, and kind of where that young person is in this process. In doing some of their initial work last year, what the team working on the Transition Discoveries Grant found is that these were the areas of focus that families felt there were effective practices, or there needed to be effective practices in place. So looking at youth development, which could include youth understanding themselves, their disabilities, and self-advocacy, family engagement and education, person-centered planning, working on relationships, and so forth. Right now, they're working on developing this survey, the outcome of this project, and they're looking at actually having 3 separate surveys that they conduct, one for youth, one for families, and one for professionals. What they're looking at as far as how it will be used is they're eventually looking at this to be an online system that you can go on, similar to other types of evaluation systems that exist, to kind of see where that young person is and then what additional supports they need to have. And the other thing that they're doing as another part of this is they're developing infographics on different topics. The first one they're working on is going to be an employment infographic. And what the next slide shows is, in doing all of these focus groups last year, these were the effective employment practices that came up with. These were things that were helping kids in getting jobs as far as employment training. So if you notice on there, career tech ed is one of those areas. There are a number of other things. So in the infographic that they're looking at putting together, and it's still in design phases, they have what constitutes like effective career development. But when talking about them, for this really to be a useful document, I think the first step is going to be to describe what are all these things, and then possibly have a link to, then this is what makes them effective. But know that this is happening, and you'll hear information the next year or so about that particular project. What I'd like you to do, and I know we have very limited time here today, but there's a handout in your folder, and it's about employment-related programs that you're aware of in the state. So this could be a project that you're doing at your Career Tech Ed Center. Maybe it's something that's happening with a school district that's preparing kids for employment. So some things that people have put up in the past are programs like Project Search, or in Berks County, they're doing that kind of unique project with kids with intellectual disability and those different shop classes. if you're aware of things, either through your Career Tech Ed Center or that you're aware of in your area, either at a school district or in your community, if you could provide this information to me. I'll be here today and tomorrow, but you could also email me. Because what we're trying to do with this information is create a map for the state where we will list, well, a picture of the state, and then list all these employment programs. Because we're trying to, one, show network, but also know what exists in the state. So that would be really helpful. Okay, I want to mention the I'm a Leader project, and this is another grant. It's also funded by the Pennsylvania Developmental Disabilities Council. The Leadership in Schools project is one where they looked at what does it take to be an effective leader, and what was developed out of this and what currently exists are a series of standards that are leadership standards, and they are aligned to the PA core standards, and there are lesson plans. And this particular project is not just for special education. This is a general special education project. So if you go to the I'mALeaderPA.org website, what you will find on that website is information for teachers that include links to these lesson plans. Then there's also information for students, youth, young adults. The I'm a Leader campaign also every year does a contest where they, it's a Leadership in Schools contest. It just finished about a month ago. What you're seeing up there are some of the winners in the past. And again, this is a both general special education linked project. And again, if you go to that website, you can find more information. The next thing I wanted to mention is the Pennsylvania Youth Leadership Network, because it is going through a fairly major change in how it looks and what its structure is. It has changed its mission too, because it's looking at it has turned into a network that is driven by inclusive organizations of youth and young adults with and without disabilities across Pennsylvania to promote self-advocacy, self-determination, empowerment, and service learning. It's a different focus. When it first started 11 years ago, it was for youth with disabilities, by youth with disabilities. As this has evolved, it really seemed to make far more sense to have this being an integrated organization. And the other big difference with this is the structure. After years and years of doing this and trying to figure out the best way to network with youth organizations across the state, what has come up in the last 2 years was to have kind of this board that would oversee and create materials and resources, but then reach out and have affiliate groups in middle schools, high schools, or in the community. And what we're looking at, if you currently have groups within maybe your VOTEC school or in your community that would be interested in kind of connecting to this bigger network across the state, there's a flyer in your folder, and there's a Survey Monkey to basically just go on and say, hey, I'd like more information, and connect to this. I know this is a little bit vague, so I am going to go to the next slide. And what we're really looking at with this affiliate thing is that there will be materials at PYON, and they have compiled this over the last 11 years, that will be housed on a website that is just accessible to the affiliates. So there'll be information on leadership skills, information on goal setting, information on community service, as well as some disability-specific things like disability history. The group itself then will promote, similar to what like the 4-H does, 2 projects a year. One dealing with service learning, one dealing with understanding disabilities. And then once a year, these folks will get together as all these diverse groups to network, to connect, again, with the ultimate goal being leadership and service learning. So again, if you are interested in finding out more information, please go to that Survey Monkey, and somebody from PYON will get back to you guys. Okay, I wanted to mention we also this year are doing employment grants. These, prior to the budget impasse, were going to be awarded September 1st. They were just awarded on March 1st. And the funding is actually federal funding, but that also was held up. So these grants, the purpose of these grants are to support competitive employment for kids by the time they graduate. And the grants now are going to be running from March 1st to September 30th, and these are the sites. So there are 10 sites across the Commonwealth. We have 3 in the east. So we have Chester Upland Community Integrated Services is a provider agency in Philadelphia, in downtown Philadelphia, and they're working with the Philadelphia School District in the Kensington area. It's primarily where they're focused. So it's kind of the Spanish, Hispanic area of Philadelphia. We also have Montgomery County IU, Intermediate 23, and then here in the center part of the state, Central Dauphin School District, Bradford School District, Milton area, and Lancaster. And then in the west, it's McGuffey School District, New Brighton area, and Pittsburgh Public Schools. Wanted to put this out there to folks because you may be contacted, you may have some of these kids that might be involved in this project or from sending school districts. So just be aware this is out there. At the transition conference this summer, we will have these folks talk about their projects. Their projects themselves, their proposals are going to have to go through some major revisions because now the time frame has changed. And I mean, I think these guys are going to need to be involved in summer employment with these kids because that's going to make a lot of sense. Our secondarytransition.org website, as we're wrapping up, you guys, are you all aware of this? Show of hands. Most of you, some head nods, some not head nods. All right, real quickly, to just show you the site, it has been updated. If you haven't gone to this site in a couple months, I would suggest going there. This is the hub for secondary transition in our state. It's not just an education entity, it really is a site that is done jointly with the Departments of Labor and Industry, Education, Human Services, as well as our agency partners. There is a new video introduction that is signed on the site. The other new thing to the site itself is we now have a disability-specific category. When you click on this, right now we only have deaf of hard of hearing as a subcategory, but when you go here, it takes you to the deaf or hard of hearing one, this page with additional resources. If I go back to the home page just real quickly, we have a variety of categories that are listed here. So for example, if you go to employment and you click on this, you will see a number of resources, maybe. There we go. That are related to employment with then links to those programs. So if you go here, you have a link to, for example, Job Gateways, OBR, and so forth. There's also presentations that have occurred in the past listed here. And then you may remember the slide guides that we had out in transition. It's kind of like that checklist planning for the future. These are the skills or strategies that young folks should be working on to prepare them for employment based on age bands. And this was something developed by Delaware, Virginia, and Pennsylvania a number of years back. And it's kind of cool because they scroll down so you can see that these are the different things that are recommended that kids are able to do in order to be successful towards employment. The nice thing about this is, say the kid is 15, 16 years of age, you can see what the expectations are here, but then go back up to those previous years and see what skills the kid needs to work on. With those that particular area with those age bands, we have those under employment, post-secondary education and training, community living, and self-determination. The other thing I just quickly wanted to show you, because I think it's a really nice resource, if you go to agencies and supports and click on this, this will take you to both Pennsylvania-specific resources as well as county-based. So if I hit resources by county, these are counties listed, and if I click on those, they will take me either to a PDF or another website that lists what resources by agency are available in that county. So if you have a chance, and again, you know, I don't wake up in the middle of the night or it's raining outside on Saturday, I would really recommend going to this website because there is really wonderful information contained there.